Hypocrisy is so deadly because our words and our beliefs are the foundation that we build our lives on. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman from New York, she has been very vocal throughout her tenure in the United States Congress on the importance of protests. Even during 2020, when there were protests all across the country, she was very clear that protests are intentionally about making people feel uncomfortable. Here's some of her tweets. This is from December 2020. She says, "The thing that critics of activists don't get is that they tried playing the polite language policy game, and all it did was make them easier to ignore. It wasn't until they made folks uncomfortable that there was traction to do anything, even if it wasn't their full demands. The whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable." Okay, so that's her bottom line. The whole point of protesting is to make people uncomfortable. Activists take that discomfort with the status quo and advocate for concrete policy changes. Popular support often starts small and grows. To folks who complain protest demands make others uncomfortable, that's the point. That is the point of protest. We want to make you uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, protest isn't actually working well. Well, that was in 2020, and now we're in 2024. And AOC and her husband were going to check out a movie when they met protesters who were unhappy with her rhetoric around the Israel-Hamas war. Let's take a look at some of that.
You refuse to call it a genocide in front of everybody.
I need you to understand.
It's not okay that there's a genocide happening. You're not actively against it.
You're lying.
I'm lying.
You're not.
You went on TV and avoided talking about it.
They are following her down the escalator now.
We're not lying.
We're not lying.
You've been saying in interviews. It's insane. You haven't been calling it a genocide. Don't tell me I'm lying.
Continuing to follow her.
It's a genocide. Just say it. Over 30,000 people are dead, AOC. You can't just say it for once. Just say it once.
Let's skip ahead a little bit. They follow her outside.
Okay, stop.
Her husband says stop.
Cut it, and you're going to cut this, and you're going to clip this so that it's completely out of context. I already said that it was, and y'all are just going to pretend that it wasn't over and over again. It's fucked up, man. And you're not helping these people, and you're not helping them.
You refuse to.
You're not.
All right, so she says early in this clip, this is not okay. You following me is not okay. You recording me is not okay. You protesting my decisions as a congresswoman is not okay. I'm just trying to watch a movie. This is not okay. What specifically is not okay? A case can be made. What's not okay is that they're making her so uncomfortable. Wow. So 4 years ago, and many times since this, anytime there have been significant protests, when Roe v. Wade was being potentially overturned and people were protesting outside the houses of the Supreme Court justices, there has been a consistent rhetoric about the need for uncomfortable protests. But now the chickens have come home to roost, as we might say here in the South, and she doesn't like it too much. So what is this? Is this blatant hypocrisy? Does she have a point here? Was she wrong about her initial assessment and protest maybe should have some level of order to it? Was she right about her initial assessment and she's just struggling to live up to her own standards? Here's the problem with hypocrisy and the reason that people have jumped all over this. Hypocrisy is so deadly because our words and our beliefs are the foundation that we build our lives on. Our words and beliefs are the foundation that we build our lives on. And so if we build a foundation of words and beliefs, and then we no longer follow those things in our everyday life, then we literally break the foundation under us and have nothing left to stand on. Let's look at what Jesus says in Matthew 7. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. And the rain came down, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. This is common in our political discourse where people come out very strongly with a position, but then you find out that in their everyday life, they're not actually living that out. Last week on the podcast, we looked at some of the issues around how Republicans who are very pro-life in every other issue are talking about some issues around IVF and are actually making some of the same arguments that people use on the pro-choice side when you're talking about abortion. Their words and beliefs are not lining up, and their foundation becomes shaky, and hypocrisy exposes you quicker than almost anything else. When we set standards for others, when someone else is being protested and we say, quit complaining, you think you're uncomfortable? That means it's working. Protest is supposed to make people uncomfortable. When we use our words and we display our beliefs like that, it is imperative that we live by the standards that we set for other people. And this is easier said than done. It's very easy to hold everyone else to the super high standard of behavior. It's very easy to think everyone else should drive very carefully and always follow the laws and never cut anyone off. But it's very easy when we're running behind or we need to get into the right turn lane and forgot to get in there in time to kind of bust our way in there and feel like we're still a good person, even though we're not living up to the standard that we yell and cuss everybody else for, right? We must live by the standards that we set for others. We're going to go back to Matthew 23, this great passage on hypocrisy. And Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first, clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but the inside are full of bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and weakness." It would have been a strong moment for AOC if she had this narrative of protest is uncomfortable, quit crying about it, protest is uncomfortable. And then when it came to her front door, if she would have just stood on those principles and said, I hear you, I'm going to stop and take the time to talk to you, I'm going to let you have your moment, I believe in this, that would have been so strong. And the people who are ideologically opposed to her would have actually been damaged by that, because at that point you can at least say, she's about it, she has this whole narrative, but she stands by it. There's consistency there. Even if I don't agree with her points, at least she is consistent in the foundation of her words and beliefs. At least there is not hypocrisy that is so evidently prevalent. And that is just kind of the way that politics seems to work these days, is we get to say almost whatever we want. There's basically no cost associated to it. And at the end of it all, we don't really live out the very things that we are proposing. The problem with our leadership class is they have rules for thee, but not for me. And this is just another example of someone demonstrating that we should learn a lesson from this, that we should think carefully about the standards that we are going to set for others. Scripture says, judge not lest you be judged. By the standard by which you judge, you will have others judge you as well. We should be very careful to make sure our words and beliefs are actual convictions of ours and not just cheap talking points. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you are subscribed so you can stay up to date with all new content. And if you want early access, exclusive content, and monthly live Q&As, make sure to check out patreon.com/ClaytonTime.